Test 1, 2. Can you hear me? Well, good morning, everybody. In the interest of time, this is the third segment. We're very pleased and proud to have President Ray Cross with us today and have an opportunity to have some interaction with Ray. We are streaming this, by the way, so we're going to allow for interaction, questions, and comments and that sort of thing. So we want you to speak into the mic if you do have a question so we can catch it, because there's another whole audience here as well. And with that, I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to just turn the mic over to Ray. You're mic'd up and ready to go anyways.
Ready to go is Good morning. Good morning. Still is morning, right? It's nice to be here. I would like to have spent some time just talking to you individually. That's hard to do, though, in a large group. I prefer not to come in with a prepared speech or to sit here and talk about things that you may not want to hear about. So what I like to do is just, let's have a conversation. You ask me questions, and feel free to ask me anything. I'll avoid the tough questions as best I can, okay? We'll try that, okay? So who wants to be first? Well, let me start out with something that may trigger some questions that you may want to ask me. I don't think it's a surprise that these are difficult financial times and difficult times beyond that. And people will say to me, oh, these budget cuts are really challenging, because it isn't just this budget cut that we're facing. It's an accumulation of budget cuts. The transformation of moving tenure from statutory language into policy, and in the process removing some of the authority of faculty, limiting that to some extent. Of course, the real results of that will be most evident in the way we practice it. So let's just put that in play. The other part is shared governance in statutory language being changed to make that primarily advisory, that term being added. All of those things now look a lot more like other institutions. So some will debate that, some have. I understand. But I've worked in 3 different states, actually 4, and it looks a lot like, and in many cases, there are more protections for faculty. But the heart of that is how we practice it. And that's yet to be determined, and it's incumbent upon us to do it thoughtfully, professionally, and together. So having said all that, the thing that we talk about too often, I think, is the language of tenure, the language of policy changes, and the language of budget cuts. That's not what's most important. What's most disconcerting is the denigration, devaluation, disrespect, anti-intellectualism attitude that exists. That scares the bejeebers out of me. And there's too much of that. And I don't know how to change that easily. Some would say, Ray, you need to be much more aggressive. You are defending us. Yes, we are. We're trying to do it in a different way. The results of the past haven't worked too well. We were cut. Regardless of party, we've been cut, budget-wise. But this is a new challenge. This is a challenge we have to find a way to help the public understand the incredible importance of higher education to the future of this state. Now, why am I talking about that at this point? You cannot denigrate faculty, disrespect the people who are preparing the state for the future. I want to pause and let you think about that. We are in the business of preparing the state for the future. And when I say the state, I am including the people of the state, the businesses of the state, the communities of the state. That's what we're in the business of doing, preparing the state for the future. Everything we do is focused on that. We don't have a very rosy future when we speak ill of, devalue, disrespect the people who do that. So that's what concerns me. I'm doing everything I can to correct that behind the scenes. I'm doing everything I can to help people understand and be educated about what it means to not invest in the future, but how much more harm you do when you disrespect the people who do that. So having said that, that's part of my bigger challenge, and it's part of yours. And I'm here to ask you to help us do that. Let me try to put that little bit of that in context. You don't know how many legislators have said to me, faculty, their workload needs to increase. No, it doesn't. Faculty need to be more efficient. And you're basing that on what, Representative? What are you basing that on? Well, this faculty member at XYZ institution was out mowing his lawn at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Were you with that faculty member when he or she was doing research? It's 7 o'clock at night, or 8 o'clock at night, or 9 o'clock at night. Or I often say, remember Sterling Hall incident at Madison, where the individual was killed? There was a researcher in that lab. No one thought there would be anybody in there. There's a researcher in that lab at, 3 o'clock in the morning? We're professionals. This is part of our job. How do we explain that to a public who doesn't understand that, who thinks we should be punching time clocks? And yet, it's our future, too. It's not just the future of our students, it's ours as well. So I use this analogy, and I use it poorly, so help me refine it. I am always in the business of marketing this institution. I can never stop doing that. Even when I'm mowing my lawn, or when I'm carrying the garbage out, or I'm talking to the mailman, or the neighbor. The UW hat never comes off. I'm asking you to do the same. We are in the business of explaining, and it's such an unbelievable responsibility, explaining to the people of this state how important higher education is to our future. And now let me try to share some of the challenges the state faces. In the middle of all of this, the population of the state is growing slightly. But a disproportionate number of those folks they look like me, old. That was supposed to be funny. Come on. If you follow the slope of the growth in population in this state, and I don't know what that slope is, let's say it's 3% a year, but it could be 2% a year, it's up. It's not much. The proportion of that is between 25 and 64, the proportion of that population has paralleled that slope for years. Now it's turning flat while this one continues to go up. And by 2030, 49% of the population in this state will be supporting the other 51%. Right now, we have about 64,000 high school graduates a year in round numbers in the state. 5 or 6 years ago, that was 71,000. In another 5 years, that'll be 60,000. The number of high school graduates coming into that are coming into the university from Wisconsin high schools is in decline. Every year, between 10 and 14,000 recent college graduates, between 10 and 14,000 every year, leave the state for employment elsewhere. That's a net migration. In other words, that's minus the in-migration. We don't have a skills gap problem, legislators. We have a population problem. It's one thing to say, I don't have the people with the right skills for this job. It's quite another to say, I can't find the people. In light of all of that, the Medicaid portion of our budget is growing at such a rapid pace. It's about 18 or 19% of the state's budget today. Within 10 years, it will be 30% of the state's budget. That's non-discretionary. They have no choice. We're in the discretionary side of that budget. What I'm painting for you may appear to be a rather gloomy picture. You may say, well, gee, let's just lie down and go to sleep and get it over with. No. We are the positive light for the future. It's through the university that the future of this state can be successful. It is through the university that we can retain the students we have, that we can attract students from out of state, and through a collaboration with our businesses, which here at Stout you practice so well. It's through those processes. We're the vehicle, we're the solution. Helping people understand that. Given traditional press, marketing, and media, doesn't work. They don't believe us anymore. I'm telling you, they just don't believe us. It has to come from your neighbors, from your community, from the people who begin to realize the future of this state is in this university. Okay. I didn't expect to say that. I really didn't. So you may have some questions, and you may disagree with some of that. It's okay to do that. It's okay. It's okay to challenge me. Don't hesitate to do that. Feel comfortable doing that. I won't be taking any names, okay?
Hi, President Cross. My name is Glenda Jones, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of English and Philosophy. And I really appreciate your comments. There's so many things about the economy, even that you mentioned, that I'm not aware of. And I think we're trying to produce students that are going to help grow the economy. We don't know whether they're going to stay in the state or leave the state, and that's really important for all of us to think about. I also was interested recently in the decision to have the chancellors not talk about the impact of the budget cuts to the state legislature. And I heard the chancellor from UW-Eau Claire read his budget cuts on Frederica Freiberg's on Friday night. And I wondered how you thought that might damage opinions, or how can we get that message out that we're trying to do the best we can in the face of things that have really been hurtful to us. Thanks.
That is such a delicate dance. It really is. Because you want to say, look, these cuts are actually impacting us by limiting the number of classes available to students, increasing the amount of time it takes to get a degree. You could say all of that. And that, in the eyes of the public, looks like, well, gee, I'm not sure I want to go there. So it's counterproductive sometimes when you do that. Then you have to say, but look at all the good things we're doing. In fact, one legislator said, I don't know what's wrong with the university. They're graduating more students. They got less money. Gee, maybe we should take more money away from them. So we're in sort of a catch-22 situation. And I would rather that we blend those two together. And that's one of the reasons we did that. And some have accused me of actually planning that scheme, that, well, we're going to do this and then canceling it, because the results have actually been better than we could have expected in a lot of ways. The attention has to be on the campuses and institutions and the impact there, not at the state level. Every time we do something, reporters want to aggregate these numbers, and they lose the sense of the impact locally. And that just became more apparent. And then, the whining joke was kind of a joke. It was kind of something we were having fun with. It wasn't meant to be serious at all. How do we present this in a way that doesn't appear as though that the sky is falling, and yet how do we clearly express the impact and the concern so they understand it? It's a delicate dance, and I think that's what you're pointing out, and I agree with that. I believe the best way to do it is as many small conversations as you can have. We need to engage our business community so they understand, and it was noticeably absent when the fund balance issue came out. The silence of the business community in response to that really bothered me. I was a chancellor at that time. Whoa, why is that? Doesn't mean that we were right or innocent in that process. The rapid growth in the tuition portion fund of our fund balances was occurring at the same time that we were in the legislature asking for 5.5% increases in tuition. That wasn't right. We shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake on our part. At the same time, we shouldn't continue to be vilified and our fund balances misrepresented or cherry-picked. And I'm going to have some fun here. Those of you who are accounting majors, hang with me, okay? Well, I could give a lecture here, and I'm trying to be careful, but university has 5 major funds, one of which is tuition, auxiliaries, general operating, federal indirects, and other. The accumulation of the balances in each of those funds is a fund balance. Much of that money is restricted and can only be spent if you're collecting money for a residence hall. That money is reserved for. The legislature does not view that as a restricted fund. So the complexity of state government and how you run a business, I'm not saying we're a business, I'm saying the financial side of this needs to look like an accounting piece. The state uses a modified cash process, which is equivalent to what I would use if I was selling eggs out of the back of my pickup. That's how simplistic that process is. They do not use an accrual process. So we have to reconcile these two different numbers all the time, because the annual financial report is an accrual process. So now we have if a balance sheet in a normal business is a balance sheet. The assets minus the liabilities should be zero. Zero, that's a balance sheet. In a nonprofit organization, you have a net position statement. This is your position statement. Assets minus liabilities. And then you have other monies that are therefore left over because you aren't distributing your equity to shareholders. So, one legislator says, look at this. The cash or cash equivalencies in the asset portion of your financial statement, they're going up. Your cash or cash equivalencies are going from 1.3 billion to 1.5 billion. What? Oh, they got more money they know what to do with. Wait a minute. Let me explain this. Assets also show up as liabilities here. The liabilities against this are just as high. You didn't gain in your net position. Now, where we did gain in our net position is something like this. The state of Wisconsin runs a pension system that is really well run. The assets exceed our liabilities at this point by $330 million within the university alone, not the rest of the state. Let me contrast that for you for every other state in which there is a public Big Ten institution. Let's start with Illinois. That's the reason it's been put on our books, because all these other states are negative. Their pension is underfunded for future liabilities, so they have to consider that as a negative. And the accounting experts got together and said, you're going to show this on your financial statement as a future liability. In our case, it's a future asset. But you think I can go into the pension fund and pull money out of that and use that to the benefit of the university? What are you smoking? So I could go on and on here. They're cherry-picking data to their advantage, and they're not honestly looking at the whole picture. Our restricted assets are going up because we have $150 million awaiting to be spent for projects, residence halls, and the like that students are paying us money for that I can't use for anything else. It's restricted. Our unrestricted is in decline and declining rather rapidly. So how do you honestly tell this story? It would be fair to say, for a legislator to say, I still think you have too much money in your unrestricted fund balance. That's a fair, I don't agree with that, but that's at least being honest. Don't cherry pick data, oh, they got lots of money. I'm sorry I got off on a tangent. You didn't ask me that, and that's my apologies. So, other questions? Well, let me respond to the no confidence vote so you don't, nobody wants to ask that, so let me You're just being nice. You don't have to be nice, okay. Because you're nice people. I'm an academic at heart, and I really believe in the importance of confidence. So when faculty say, well, we don't have confidence in leadership, that should trouble us. That should be, obviously, some people are saying, oh, this doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. It's important. It's an act that says, I don't think you're doing the right things here. You aren't listening to us. In this particular case, I disagree with it, but I respect it greatly and I want to listen to it. So I don't want you to misinterpret that. At the same time, I think there's an important change that has to take place in higher education, and we have to do it wisely. And it's a delicate balance. The country is so polarized politically. Gee, tell us something we didn't know, Ray. I mean, come on. The response is constantly gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Brick throwing, brick throwing, brick throwing. We're just going to lob grenades from one side to the other instead of sitting down and trying to figure that out. And my approach has been, I'm an educator. My job is try to educate legislators, help people understand. How do I do that? It's hard to do that if you just hit them in the face with a brick. It's really hard to do that. Now there's a time when you do throw bricks, so don't get me wrong. There are principles here that I think are really important. And one of those, to me, is that you cannot denigrate higher education or the people who provide it. You can criticize us for how we do it or whether we're doing it well. It's entirely appropriate. Or we should be doing it more efficiently. That's fine. But don't denigrate the people who do this. So that's a principle for me, but I'm going to try to be as polite and as respectful as I can, because I want to be at the table when the discussions about all these other things occur. I want to try to convince people and educate, particularly a number of legislators who may not understand us well. They don't understand if you see the response to the no confidence vote, it's just they don't understand what that means because it doesn't fit into their world. It fits into ours. We understand what that means, and we may look at it and say, well, this is really petty. No, it's not. Warren Bennis, in his book that he wrote in 1984, thereabouts, that tells you how old I am already, geez. It's a really great book. Bennis, Bert, can't remember the other guys, two of them wrote it. And he's got a chapter in there, a section on leadership qualities, and one of them is on trust. And there's a little phrase in there that he uses that I find very interesting. He says trust is not about whether you are emotionally connected to the leader or vice versa in an organization. It's all about predictability. I know Ray Cross, important point there. Do leaders have relationships with people in the organization? I know Ray Cross. I know how he's going to respond to that. It's predictable. The other thing he says about the importance of trust is that trust is the emotional glue that holds an organization together. And what faculty are saying when they say we don't have confidence that we don't trust you to represent us well or to uphold the principles of higher education that we consider valuable. That's what they're really saying. And that's a serious indictment in the academy. And I take that very seriously. I don't agree with it, but they're looking at this from a different lens, and that's entirely fair. Gee, I just could stand here and ramble for hours. I apologize for that.
Hi, Ray. Welcome to the campus. And we know each other. I'm Nelu Ginch. I'm the Faculty Senate Chair. And what worries me the most is that we are, maybe 1 year, not even a year into this budget. And what I'm hearing from the faculty and, senators is, do you know anything about the next budget? People are starting worrying about what's coming at us. And this is counterproductive, right? Our role is to focus and worry about the students. What are the students going to do 2 years from now? How can we have a better education for them? How can we, that's why I wanted to be in this position. That's why I came to Stout, because I like interacting with students. I like seeing them grow, right? Knew nothing about budgets, maybe I know less now than before, and that's not why I want to be here for the next 10 years, to worry about budgets more and more. And I think we are at a point here where whatever number the game that we play, they throw a number at us. I said this yesterday in the budget forum, but they throw a number at us, and then we start begging for something, better and so on. We should, that doesn't work. So I think we have to have a different way of doing things here. And I think we have to make them understand that even if it's minus $1 million, or whatever minus is going to come our way, I think we are done. Because I look at the morale of people, or the way people behave, we're not going to be the same if something like that is going to happen.
Yes and no. What a politician I am, right? If you look at the state funding for higher education, public higher education across the nation, it's going down, and it has gone down more precipitously recently in Wisconsin. So I got that. And the pressures from other things, including K-12, Medicaid, roads. You think the fight over the budget is going to get difficult in the next biennium. A lot of it's going to be how are we going to fund upkeep on our roads. And at the same time, you have a public that is really averse to raising taxes. So how do we function in regardless of party? I think we're all like that. This is a value proposition that we're in. And in order to help people understand the value of higher education, it almost now has to switch from a mechanism of we didn't have to do anything in the past. Now we have to explain that. And we always want to resort to a marketing campaign. That's how we're going to change the world. In an era of social media and other kinds of vehicles, the concept of what is authentic and genuine is difficult to sort out. So that's why I'm asking you to help locally explain the value of that. Every time one of these students stands in front of the board or in front of the public and tells their story, man, that is a powerful message. They don't hear it from us, they hear it from the students who benefit from what we do. Now, why should you be concerned about that? I really think the university has to figure out how to right size, because the money's not going to be there. How do we do the right thing and do it well? And we have to do it together. We're all going to disagree on how best to do that. But right sizing is an outcome, I think, of some of this. At the same time, the biggest polling item that politicians are looking at across the nation right now is affordability, higher ed affordability, and student debt. The Democrats are arguing student debt's the biggest problem. The Republicans are arguing affordability is the biggest problem. Obviously, they're connected. They're reading the same polls. In Wisconsin, that polls in excess of 85% across all segments of the population. Think about that for a minute. So then when the governor starts talking about freezing tuition yet again, he's reading those polls and responding to that. So what you need to know that we're trying to present alternatives. What do I mean by alternatives? Because if affordability is your goal, tuition shouldn't be the big target. Time to degree should be the big target. You want to save cost of higher education. You help students graduate faster. Not only do you have opportunity cost savings, you have other benefits from that. The state needs those graduates. So what we're looking at is a whole bunch of variations of how best to do that. And he's listening to that. He very much is, which we appreciate. But we understand why that's such a pressure point for politicians. And I think, I'll share some, I'm way off, Melu, from your question, but that's the way I am. I'll share some really positive news for you, I hope. Right now, we were told to increase our budget last year by 4% for fringe benefits. The DOA collects those fringe benefits and pays all that, so. Increase it by 4%. We came along and said, well, it looks like it might be another 1.5%. So after we'd taken that from the campuses, we took another 1.5%. So we were told about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago that the fringe benefit savings for 2 reasons to the university was not going to be a 4% increase, but a 6% decrease. So why is that? 2 reasons, and I want to be clear about this. Nothing hidden about this. 2 reasons. We have, and I don't know the exact number, but we have roughly 1,400 fewer people needing fringe benefits through layoffs, people leaving, unfilled positions. That's a sizable amount. Secondly, the state created a much more flexible process. In other words, they now allow you, if your spouse's insurance would cover you, you can choose to take that benefit in a different way. Those 2 things saved us a pile of money. So the first 1.5% has already been distributed back to the campuses. That's back to the campuses. The rest of this, we're having a meeting with the chancellors on 6th of May, and we believe we are going to try to use that remaining funds back to the campuses for compensation. And some of it we think we can use as base, and some of it we think will be one-time money. We don't know yet. We want to talk to the chancellors about that more. We want to get that to you as quickly as we can. That means hopefully by the middle of July, that will be, right, Phil? That will be taken care of. Oh, okay, well, how can you do this, Ray? Well, we are allowed, the board cannot issue a pay plan across the board. We can't do that. That's only by the state. The state can only do that. But we can do it for equity. We can do it for market, which is it's becoming abused because we ask you to go find another offer, and then we'll, yeah, that's just brilliant on our part, isn't it? That was it. Don't put that in the paper. That was an editorial comment. And thirdly, for promotion. But in the last budget, we also got merit. So we can provide adjustments for merit. What I'm suggesting you do is have at least 3 or 4 categories. So outstanding, superior, really good, meritorious, not so good. Something that gives us the ability to award merit. So that's a compensation is a big issue, and we're trying to help you. It's been a big issue for 8 years, let's be honest. Even though you got a 1+1 at one point, we took money away through furloughs, and we took money away through added expenses on your part for benefits. So there's another part here. Yes, there's more good news, at least momentarily. Normally, the university saves across the system in the utility costs, I don't know, maybe $12 million. Maybe it's been 7 to 12. Probably Phil knows more than I do. This year, it looks like that could be 20 million. We had a great winter, really cheap fuel prices. A lot of things came together. So we want to use a majority of those funds to increase financial aid for students. So we want to use these funds for compensation to help our employees, and we want to use the residual funds, the savings from utilities, for financial aid for students. How much do you want that to be, Nelu? We think that's about 35 million.
Okay.
Across the system.
Yes.
And we don't know what percentage of that is base or appropriately base, or which percentage would have to be one-time money. We don't know that yet. We have to think all that through, what's wise. And we also have to deal with the public relations part of that. Gee, we cut you $250 million, and you guys have this, you found this. No, these are things that we have done that are a result of those cuts that save this money. We have fewer people, so we're going to pay the ones we have better. Let me repeat that. We have fewer people, we're going to pay the ones we have better. Secondly, we think affordability is an important item, and we know utility costs are low at this point, and we're going to take that money and do everything we can to shove that into the hands of students who need it. So.
Ray, this is Bob in the corner. Just one more point on that.
Is that Bob in the corner?
Yeah. Comment a little bit, too, on the urgency to make sure we expend these funds, because they'll show up on our balance sheet that you're talking about.
Those fund balances are killing us. I had an individual the other day say that those assets that should be positive, that are restricted, that are, those kinds of things, should be positive to any other balance sheet, are a negative to us. They're a liability. So we have to find ways to effectively use those. And if these monies aren't spent by June 30th, they're added to our fund balance, not funds that we expected. So I don't care anymore. I don't give a rat's patoot. That's an eloquent phrase, I know, but nevertheless. This is the way we run our business. These are the right things to do. We're being honest and open about it. Nobody's trying to hide, conceal anything. It's just the way it is. Here's how we got it, why we got it. Here's what we're going to do with it. These are our biggest problems. So some of that's going to go into our balance sheet, fund balances. But if we can spend it as quickly as we can, wisely, not foolishly. We're not just going to throw money out the window here. So that's what Bob is saying. We're going to be hurt by it, but also that's the way it is.
Ray, Chuck Beaumark, Dean of the STEM College. I'll reflect back on something you talked about, was right-sizing of UW's system. Can you follow up on that, or further talk about potential low-hanging fruit or obvious choices that could be made?
I'll try. There are a number of folks who think, well, the university should close some campuses. University doesn't make that choice. We do not have that choice. That's the legislature. You want to do that? That's your choice. The only choice we have is to starve them. That's not a very good option either. What we have been trying to do is we've been trying to take our cuts proportionally according to how we distribute money across the system. I call that horizontally cutting. We can't do that much longer. I mean, we just can't do that. You make the weak weaker and the strong weaker. So we have to vertically cut. So what are the next steps? Well, let me pause. I'll come back to that. Before that, we have to do a lot of things to streamline and make our operations more efficient. That's what we have a reform agenda focused on 4 things right now: IT, budget, HR, and procurement. And we can do a lot to streamline that. And we're going to present initial findings at the board meeting in June and how much savings we think we could realize through that. So some of those savings will be, we've got to do that too. We need to the legislature's credit, we need to be operating as efficiently as we can, not in a classroom. Let me repeat that in a different way. There is no cheap way to avoid engaging students in the classroom. There's no cheap. You can enhance it. You can do a lot of things with technology, but there's no cheap way. Plato argues that learning takes place, his terms now, somewhere in the dialogue between teacher and student. Dialogue is not cheap. It takes time, and that's just life. And the other part of that is that I can enhance that online. I can do a lot of those things, but it's still that process. It's a human-to-human interface. But the processes that support that, all the way around it, we can improve. We can standardize. We have 942 different ways to initiate a payment to an employee. In case you didn't get that. So standardization and streamlining and lean processes need to be employed in the way we support those kinds of activities. And that, there's no question about that. And a lot of that has to do with, centralization and standardization. And we're trying to be careful about that. So now, having said all that, let me switch back over here to this vertical stuff. I think the next phase of this, we have to have conversations about, okay, please don't, I'm not trying to pick on any area, but how many bachelors of science do we need in, I don't know, philosophy? I'm a philosophy guy, so I can say that. That's not my background. I have 2 sons that teach philosophy. I believe deeply in philosophy. But what do we, as a matter of fact, it's actually quite cheap to teach, so maybe that's not the one I should pick on. But what I'm getting at is, does there need to be a conversation about what do we have to have throughout the system to support a world-class university system? And you know, there's always a lot of attention on Madison. But the real class in the world-class statement is the rest of the system is amazing. And that's often, it's just taken for granted. So, I'm sorry, that was another sidetrack. What I'm getting at is that the hard questions about verticality in the budget has to be considered, and I think that was part of your question. The very last phase would be closing the campus. Now, the reality is, and what people don't understand, well, Ray, let's just close Campus X. And probably a lot of you have a campus in mind. Don't you say it. It would actually cost you money to do that. Why? For 10 to 12 years, at least at a minimum, you're paying off their PR-funded, program revenue-funded projects because they no longer have students to pay that. So that obligation shifts to the rest of us. Your portion of that, you'd have to pick up that debt. And I don't think there's a campus, yes there is, there's one campus that has, it would be lower than 15 years. and it's not who you think. And it's a sizable amount of money. So you wouldn't save any money for a long time to do that. But there's a bigger principle. So if you're looking at it only from the economic side, there's a bigger principle here. Is it the state's responsibility to provide a quality education accessible to the people of the state? Or do we just abandon portions of the state? I think that's a serious moral commitment on the part of the state. How do we do it well? Very fair question. Can we do it well? At some point, you drop below that quality level. Okay, you don't have critical mass to sustain it, and whether it's students or other resources. I got that. But I would argue that Doug and I were talking on the way over here before Bob joined. So Doug could be more honest. The challenge is this institution has gone through historically with the burning of the building and the death of Mr. Stout and the threats to this. My goodness, those are challenges that this institution has faced historically. We're facing one not nearly as serious right now. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. The irony is, it's us. And that's, we have to find ways to solve this problem on behalf of the state. And how do we do that? Well, they have to give us these resources. Yeah. And we'll argue for our portion. But we also have to explain to them business X, business Y, business Z, and I could go on and on and on and on, was created by a graduate from one of our institutions, is sustained by employees that they hire from our institution. The idea for that product was spawned in one of our labs, in the minds of one of our faculty. This is a great economic engine. And and the part that I have to argue over and over again, we don't just exist for people to get jobs. And I understand that. Goodness, if you're an adult in our society and you're ill-equipped to participate in our economy, okay, that's a problem. I got that. But higher education has so much more value than just a job. It is, my goodness, what have we become? There are some brilliant people in our history that are rolling over in their graves right now. And one of them is Thomas Jefferson. This is a democratic society that's so dependent on critical thinking and an informed public and civil debate. The rancor and hostility and the polarization that you hear from people today, it just makes my stomach turn. My goodness, what have we become? We have sunk to the bottom. And part of this is the media that builds on all of this polarization. We're in an environment where that shouldn't happen. We should teach people how to behave, whether it's in racial issues with students or in inclusivity issues, whether it's how we treat each other. Of all people, we should be there. Yeah, I know, I'm talking all the time.
President Cross, my name is Darren Watucky. I'm the director of the Student Centers, and I think we have a lunch that may meet your taste and affordability later after this. Welcome you there. Prior to arriving at Stout, 16 years ago, I worked at UW colleges, UW-Waukesha. It was a great opportunity for me, excellent organization. Prior to that, much of my upbringing and my success is certainly impact to a very caring and nurturing agricultural community. A big question that I think a lot of county boards have been looking at is the although the number relatively small, the impact to UW colleges and the extension is great as far as the budget cuts. I know a lot of county boards are lamenting the fact of the regionalization of the extension. Certainly counties with UW College campuses are lamenting the regionalization there. I do have a lot of sympathy for my former colleagues that are still in the colleges. I know they're dealing with a lot. Do you think, as former chancellor of the college and extension, now president of the U system, that whatever dwindling unrestricted reserves we may have, some sort of investment in that area would be an investment of goodwill for all the counties across the state, and an investment back in the Wisconsin idea, because really the extension program, ag extension program is a great example of the Wisconsin idea. No matter what your question, the answer, I have to leave afterwards, so it's something personal.
So you're telling me not to be offended no matter what I say, right? It's a serious challenge for colleges and extension. Their cut is proportionally similar to what everybody else is cut. Their response to that was, if you remember, was to focus entirely on eliminating the administrative side. To their credit, on the college's side, and I have to say that it was part of a plan when I was there. If this ever happened, this is the next step we were going to take, was to eliminate administrative, non-instructional activity and consolidate. So that happened on the college's side. They're doing something similar on extension, although it's having a lot of the roles within extension are both administrative and functional. And what it looks a lot like is what other states have done in order to deal with the cuts they face. Minnesota has done it for years. Other states have done it for years. Wisconsin has enjoyed an extension system that was very similar to the way it was 30 years ago. And the counties have done a wonderful job of collaborating and supporting that. I think about 40% of the salaries of those county employees come from the county government, about 60% from the state. The irony in this is that when Kathy Kramer-Walsh did her survey of what people of Wisconsin liked about the university, what did they really value in the university? Football team was number one. Band was number two. This is from Madison's perspective. And number three was extension. And that was very close to the top. And why was that? Because so many extension employees are embedded in the county they know them, they see them, they understand them. There's a lesson there for us. That's what I'm saying to you. That kind of transformation occurs locally. And that's a value statement that those folks are making as a result of those employees locally. I avoided your question very nicely, didn't I?
Yeah, I think we got one more. Couple more.
Hi, Ray. Devenberg, Engineering and Technology Department. One of the themes that's kind of come out of what you've said today is we want to try to avoid further destroying the system, the institution, moving forward. And I'm sure, as you're aware, one of the big challenges with doing that is recruiting and retaining quality faculty, which comes up all the time. As someone who's been involved a lot in that recently, and recently made 2 offers for faculty positions and had both of those offers declined, how do you anticipate, or maybe what advice do you have for those of us who are attempting to recruit quality faculty, and also the others among us that are attempting to retain quality faculty that we already have, such that we don't further hurt our future of this institution and of the system?
That's a real problem, and it's a problem. It's a money issue, so I'm not trying to. It's not only a money issue, but clearly a money issue is really important. You have to be able to compete with competitive salary. But I suspect that at least those 2 you mentioned, probably wasn't necessarily much of a money issue. It was more of a perception and an aura. Is this really a place where, what's going on here? There's that negative, is that correct?
Yeah, I can add to that a little bit. I'm of course, we don't know 100%.
Yeah.
My imagination would be that it's a combination of the environment of higher education in Wisconsin, with discussions going on within the state of increased faculty workload, which will particularly affect our department fairly strongly. And it's rather unique because in general, historically, our offers aren't declined. Generally, we're very successful with hiring. So I think those probably are the two biggest contributors: workload discussions that are going on currently and general environment in the state for higher ed.
One of the things that one of the things that I'm concerned about on the no confidence vote is that gets national attention, and that creates an uproar. Actually, it doesn't bother. I'm amazed at myself. I have to tell you that. Why isn't this bothering me? It should bother me. We're all concerned about how other people think about us. But what really does concern me is nationally, the perception is that there's all kinds of chaos in Wisconsin, and that's just a continuation of this 10-year discussion. So, excuse me, that does concern me. I think you have to help with that. And I've said this to several of the Madison faculty. Don't shoot yourself in the foot here. Be careful. We have to do the same, and be cautious about how we're perceived on the national scene because of that recruiting piece. I don't think this is going to last very long, but I think the outcome of this will last for quite a while. That's the hard part. Once you destroy the image of the institution, destroy it. Once you damage the image, it's hard to recover that. It takes a long time to do that.
Okay, another question here. You ready, Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura Donovan. I'm the newly elected president of the Stout Student Association. You mentioned earlier that the UW institution is the future of the state. And so a part of that is making sure that we attract and retain students. And something that's really important for attracting and retaining students is if the institution has values that they agree with. So more and more young people are having concerns for environmental and social justice and issues of inclusivity and respect for diversity on campuses. So my question is, what do you and your colleagues do to not only to go past marketing the UW institution as something that reflects those values, but also make changes to address those concerns?
Three responses to that. First, listening to students, and listening. In case you haven't noticed, I'm an old white guy. I don't see myself. I often don't understand the issues you're talking about, so I need to listen. And there's an old saying in I can't remember if it's Arabic or what it is, but hearing is not necessarily listening. In fact, there's a word, and I think it's in Arabic. There is no such thing as hearing disconnected from doing. So you didn't really hear if you don't have an action subsequent to that. And I forget the language, so those of you that are experts in Arabic don't. What I'm getting at here is that part of what we're trying to do is listen to students and understand. Have them help us figure out what we're not doing well and point that out, and what action do we take to try to fix that. Secondly, one of the things that, I don't know if many of you have read Florida's books, Richard Florida's books. Some of that's being contested right now, but this concept of what makes an economy grow by region. One of the tenets of his principles is a diverse population, a very inclusive and diverse population. That's where 40 and unders want to live. That's where they want to work. That's the kind of company they want to work for. And helping people understand that is really important. And thirdly, there's a moral imperative here, and I want to speak to it this way. It's not just an economic imperative. Let me tie it to the economy first. The largest achievement gaps between underrepresented groups and their white counterparts in the United States in K-12 are in Milwaukee and Madison. The university's response to that historically has been, well, that's K-12's problem. That's not our problem. We can no longer let that happen. We cannot do that. It's our problem. We have to own it. We have to be a part of the solution. We can't just ignore it. That's ignoring the Wisconsin idea at its very core. We have to have an impact and improve the human condition of all the people of the state, all the people. The other element of that is the economy in the future of this state. If I can't prepare, stupid statement, if we can't prepare all of Wisconsin's people to engage fully in this economy is going downhill. It's not going uphill. And that's such an important part of this responsibility. To that end, we failed the first search because we didn't find the right person. We're trying to find an external inclusivity, diversity special assistant to the president to help us engage those communities more effectively. Communities of color, whether it be the Hmong community, the Latino Hispanic community, the African American community, I could go on and on here. Externally, how do we connect with them? The university we have all these internal student-focused processes. We have employee-focused process trying to improve the diversity and inclusivity of our employees. We have to have an impact on the state. How do we do that? How do we engage in those problems? I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a speech here. The achievement gap doesn't begin in kindergarten. It begins in prenatal care. The university should be the strongest, most vigilant, aggressive proponent of early childhood development. We know it works. It's evidence-based research. The achievement gap is already there by kindergarten. The first 1,800 days is how you change that. And the university has to be a part of that. We have to be part of that.
Hi, Nels Paulson, Social Science Department. Thank you for your response to Laura's question. I think that's something that I'd like to hear more of, this expression of the university as being something where we're building a better society and not just talking about jobs and so on. And so I think if you can express that more, we can change the dialogue a little bit. But I want to come back to a point you made earlier about how laying off or getting rid of a whole bunch of people is going to give us raises. And so I really caution you to use that expression towards legislatures or anybody else, because it's not raises unless it exceeds CPI. So there's a difference between nominal and real income, and we've been getting our salaries cut every single year that they're not kept up with CPI. And so I think that that needs to be expressed, as we're not, even in merit-based or anything else, we're not getting raises. And what we're doing instead is that a lot of our highest quality people are spending all of their time either trying to figure out how to work within the budget cuts or trying to hire new people, because we're losing our best professors, right? We're making 79% of the average comparable universities, right? Not even 79% of like the top. So we're below, and we're having a hard time retaining people. So people are either spending their time working with the budget cuts or hiring new people or spending their time applying for jobs elsewhere. And regardless whether they get jobs elsewhere or not, that's how they're spending their time. That's where their mindset is. We had this meeting at the beginning of the year to talk about sabbatical. And there was 20 of us in the room. And all of a sudden we got the word that only 4 people in the entire university were going to get sabbatical next year. And as soon as the conversation of what sabbatical application looks like ended, the entire room got into, well, how many places are you applying to? And I was looking around the room, these are 20 of our best professors. And this is where their conversations are going. This is where their time is being spent. And so I just encourage you to talk about the fact that you want your smartest people in the state to be spending their intellectual capacity on teaching and research and not on these other things. And I hope that you can reframe the narrative in some of these ways.
Let me have some fun with that for a minute, will you? And please don't be offended by this back and forth that we have here, okay? Because this is what I'm dealing with, this question right here. We see ourselves in a world competing with other universities where other faculty are making more money. That's our competition. The world around us sees us in competition with their neighbor. They can't reconcile that. So let me share with you some facts. The average earnings, not earnings, wages, average wages in the United States since 2000 have been flat. Average is about $50,000 a year, flat. No increase in wages. So when I use that language with legislators or with the public, hey, what's wrong? Who do they think they are? A bunch of elite academics. They think they deserve more. Well, they don't understand that in order to retain that best faculty member, we're not competing with the neighbor in another town. We're competing with faculty elsewhere. I have to help them understand that this is a different market. And that's part of my challenge. So I'm sensitive to that, and I try to tell that story a little differently in different venues. But you see where I'm coming from? I'm trying to persuade the public and legislators that this is appropriate, and at the same time not revile them because they already think we're a bunch. I shouldn't say they. I've got the press here. I got to be careful. So I've got to be careful with this. There's so much of the public that thinks that we are elitist. We deserve more. Well, our market points to that. And I would argue that humility is probably something that would help us in this process. That doesn't mean that I should give up market compensation.
Just following up with that,
I'll repeat it.
okay. So just following up with that, you talk about wages being flat since 2000. I recently looked at our fact book from 97, 98, so I just wanted to have on record. And full professors at Stout, CPI adjusted, are at 6,000 to 7,000 less than they were. But we're not flat at Stout. We are down in the last 18 years. On top of that, you talk about comparing to our neighbors. Let's compare to our students. We have a lot of academic staff who make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 less than the students they're teaching in the classes per year. I mean, it's easy for people to get this perspective of the Madison professor. They think a professor is averaging 6 figures. We have a lot of academic staff who are teaching 15 credits, who are working hard with very little job security. We have a lot of faculty in a similar situation. And our fresh graduates are making more money than them day one out of the door here. So it's that comparison, I think, needs to be made. Forget about the comparison to the other universities. Let's just compare to the community we're even in.
I'm not arguing that at all. I hope I didn't say that. I'm not trying to be, I'm agreeing with you. I'm trying to explain to you that how do I explain to a public, and how do you explain to a public in that setting? And your points are on target, well made. I agree with that. That's my position too. Thank you so much. I hope you are. I hope you realize how respected you are within the system. One of the things I've always been concerned about is the system should, the value of a system is its ability to respect and improve the diversity of types of institution within the system. Any efforts to homogenize, make them all look the same, is dangerous to our strength. So your distinctiveness as a polytechnic and your ability to perform that well is really valued and respected throughout the system, but particularly in Madison. And I hope you realize that, and that speaks well for you. So my compliments. Thank you very much. Thanks.